My name is Abigail Cox. I'm the coordinator of the Murray State Women's Center, and we have partnered with Carrie McGinnis from the Office of Alumni Relations throughout this year to promote women's leadership through our Leadership Lunch series. And Carrie, you pulled in some fabulous speakers, including Sandra, who spoke at our March luncheon.
Yes, that's one of my favorite things about being in the role of alumni director for Murray State University is meeting some fabulous rock star women who graduated from Murray State and who continue to not only support the institution, but advocate for the institution. And Sandra is one of those women. And Sandra is the president and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce in Paducah. But prior to that, Sandra was the first woman to serve as the chairman of the board for that organization. She's had several firsts in her career. She was also the first woman to chair the Paducah Economic Development Board and continues to serve on the city commission for the city of Paducah, the mayor pro tem currently, I believe, Sandra, if that's correct.
Yes.
And on top of all of that, she is a rabid racer fan, a season ticket holder, a beloved Murray State alumna, and someone who does a great job advocating on behalf of women throughout her career. So Sandra, thank you for doing this.
Thank you both. I really appreciate this opportunity and look forward to the conversation. And yes, I love Murray State. I feel like it changed my life. I'm a Murray, Callaway County native. And so there was no question about where I was going to go to school. It was at Murray State and it launched my career. And I'm just happy to be here with you.
Well, it is Women's History Month. So during March, we see a lot of content just on women's experiences and their contributions to society. But as Carrie mentioned, promoting and advocating for women is something that you stay involved in throughout the year, which was really evident when you came and you spoke with our students, just how passionate you are about women's leadership. So what would you say sparked that passion for you to just continually be involved in that kind of work?
Boy, all of these, I know all of these are going to be hard questions, so I don't want to say that every time, but my mom and dad had a farm, and we had dairy cattle and we showed dairy cattle, and all through that time, my mom and my dad both, but my mom in particular pushed me so much to be involved in the community. They got me in they had me enroll in 4-H. They had me competing in 4-H speech competitions. They made sure that we had cattle that would win at cattle shows throughout, we traveled throughout Kentucky and Tennessee. I have a brother who's still in Murray. He's 8 years older than I am. And so he would help get them ready, and we would load up and take off and go. And so my mom just always inspired me to be better and to look for ways to be better. And then through the years, I've had a lot of women who encouraged me. And I hope that I am repaying that favor now. I'm a very big supporter of leadership and what we can do to support each other. I think we kind of talked about this show as being about the topic of showing up and how important that is. And, at 2:30 this morning when I was wrestling in my mind, like, what am I going to say? What am I going to, I hope I don't say too much or say too little. I thought I'm just going to call Abigail and I'm just going to cancel. I'm just going to tell her I can't do this. And so, the theme of showing up makes you go ahead and put yourself out there and do things that you might not otherwise do. And I think that that's important that we do that for each other.
Absolutely. Well, we are glad that you were able to show up today, because I've been definitely looking forward to this conversation. But you mentioned in our lunch that we had last month that you held several different leadership positions, not just in government, but I think you also had like some manufacturing leadership positions, just kind of all over the board. What would you say was the most significant challenge that you faced in leadership that maybe you didn't always see your male counterparts also having to face and address?
Mm-hmm. I worked in manufacturing for 26 years. I started with what was a company called Westvaco and started in their public affairs, government affairs department. And a couple of years after being there was named the public affairs manager. And at that time, we were, I think, a Fortune 500 company. We had paper mills in 5 locations at that time. And there had not been a woman in that position. And this was in the mid-90s, 1990s. I'm going to age myself here. And I went to New York, which is where our corporate office was, and interviewed for the position. And I had, I think, a 3-month-old baby at the time. So, I didn't get the job the first time, but about 2 years later, I was offered the job then. And, that's been a theme of mine. I've interviewed the first time and then maybe didn't get it at 3 different jobs, and then was offered the job within about a year to 2 years later. So I think that you always have to be positioning yourself as a woman, and as a man too. I think probably everything I say would also be inspiring. I would hope for a man too, to help them. But one thing with women that I remember, my job at Westvaco was public affairs manager. So that pushed me to be out in the community. We were a paper mill. We were obviously, we had challenges there. We used trees to make paper. So we then ended up with a chemical plant there. So we had a lot of things where we needed to be very active in the communities surrounding us. So I was very involved in Paducah and was asked to be on the Paducah Chamber board. And then a couple of years later was asked to be the chairman. And then a few years later, I did move into the position with Paducah Economic Development. But during all of that time, sometimes I would be the only woman in the room. And especially at the paper mill, I was the only woman in the room. And a lot of times I was the youngest in the room as well. So one of the things that I remember thinking it was just me until I finally read it in a book that another woman had said, is sometimes I would say something or present an idea and talk about it, and nobody would really react or say anything. And then maybe within 5 to 10 minutes later, a man in the room would say the exact same thing that I know I had just said. And sometimes I would be like, wait, I just said that. I didn't say it out loud. And I'm going, wait, I just said that. And, I just thought, well, this is just me. I'm just not very articulate. I'm not presenting the idea as I should. I mean, women do that. We blame ourselves. And later I was reading in a book, and I wish I could quote which author it was, but they told about that and told other women that had that same experience. And I think it was just women getting in the room and saying things, and maybe people they just didn't grab onto it at the time. And so you just have to own it in your own mind that, hey, that was my idea. I did articulate that. I'm just glad it's being done and being heard. Right. And, sometimes you just have to accept that. There's no way you can yell and say, I just said that, even though you want to sometimes.
I think today you could, though, Sandra. I think that because of all of those conversations that you've been in and I've been in, and I'm only going to guess Abigail's been in for years past, where we've had to sit back and bite our tongue and think, I just said that. I think today women in a boardroom can now say, I just said that. And it's, I think, because of all of the battling and fighting that so many of us have done for so many years, that we've gotten to that point in the workforce. Don't you think so?
I think so, Carrie. And honestly, today, people would not be afraid. I mean, people would not be surprised if I spoke up and said that. Like, right.
Well, they'd listen the first time, that we wouldn't have to defend it later on. That's right.
Because they know now. I mean, as you get older, you've always heard that phrase, as you get older, you lose your filter. A lot of that's true. You do. And so now they wouldn't be surprised. I don't know how that would be accepted. You'd have to, I think one of my comments I said, Abigail, when I spoke to your group, was sometimes you have to pick your battles.
Right.
And I think you would just have to decide how important it is at that period of time to say, I just said that, or do you just kind of go, And hopefully if there are other women in the room, they know you just said that. Right. And maybe somebody else will say, as Sandra said earlier, and that's a message to us. If we're in a room and a woman says something and people don't listen, and somebody else later says it, go back and say, yes, as Carrie said, presented that idea earlier, so that we can bring that to the table.
Yeah,
That
that's a
is
great point.
excellent point. Yes, excellent point.
If
I
you
think
don't
it's
mind,
just, go ahead,
go ahead,
Carrie.
Abigail. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I just think it's so impressive that I didn't know that for all those positions or several of those positions, you interviewed once and then didn't get it and went back. And to me, that is so impressive because I know for me and for a lot of the students that I talked to, that rejection the first time would be all it took to just make me not want to go back or doubt myself and think this isn't the right fit for me, or I'm not good enough for this and I wouldn't try it again. So it's just so impressive to me that you just kept showing up, kind of like what the message of this talk is about. What were you going to say, Carrie?
Well, I just think you just made an excellent point. It's showing up, having the confidence to say, you know what, maybe I wasn't in a place in my career then, but I'm in that place now and I'm going to try it again. And that is really brave, Sandra. And for you to have done that more than once, I think sends a really terrific message to the women who are watching this. Keep showing up. Don't just show up once, keep showing up.
Don't give up. And, I probably wasn't ready for either one. The first time I had just moved to Paducah, and I interviewed for two different jobs here. And those are the two I did not get. So I took another one that actually was kind of out of PR. I was wanting in PR marketing. But I made sure that I met the right people. And that, I was building my own resume in Paducah. I'm not from over here. I'm originally from Murray. So I was able to start meeting the right people so that when those jobs came open, I did work at the Kentucky Oaks Mall when it was first opening, and then at the community college. And at the time, the community college president did call me back. And this was 2 years later, and asked me to come back and interview. And he mentioned to me the fact that he had noticed that I'd always been nice to him. I'd always been back out in the community. I'd always kept that front of being cooperative and working and wanting to grow and be a part of a successful organization in this community. So I think it helped me. So that's what I would say. I tried to tell your students, Abigail, that day, it just might not be the right time. And honestly, at the paper mill, I was like an assistant in public relations and moved up to the public affairs manager. The timing was better the second time around because it gave me 2 years, probably more time for my daughter to get a little bit older, but for me to learn more from the person who had been in that job. Having a mentor, man or woman, is it's just priceless. And, I think I said, Abigail, everybody should work for a Dick Boyd. And that was my boss at the paper mill. And he lives out in South Carolina now. And I hope he would be honored that I said that because he was hard driven and he wanted us to succeed. And he counseled me and he would advise me and say, just even things that are good things to be watching for, being perceptive, having that perception about what you should and shouldn't do and when it's important and when it's not, and all of those things. It's just very beneficial in progressing forward in your career.
I noticed something, Abigail, that she just said that I wanted to just pigtail off of quickly with a point, if you don't mind. Okay. And that is, Sandra, earlier you talked about when you applied for and interviewed for a position in New York, you had a 3-month-old at the time. And just now you said, when you went for that position the second time, it allowed your daughter to get a little older. And one of the things that I'd like to point out is that you have children, I have children, Abigail, you have children. And this is a sweeping generalization, so I will admit that right up front, but I wouldn't imagine that there are many conversations where the men in the room are saying, well, it allowed my daughter to get a little bit older, or I had a 3-month-old at the time. And I think that there is a difference there in that we as women struggle so much to try and find that work-life balance on behalf of our families. And I don't know that men working their way up in the workforce have always had to do that, to really consider that, well, this takes away from my dad time, or they call it mom guilt. They don't call it dad guilt. Right. And I have struggled for years to try and figure out that right balance between career and children. Just last night, I was working at my dining room table and I had my laptop out. It was probably 9 o'clock. My daughter was trying to get my attention because she wanted me to help her write a paper. And I was like, Sadie, if I don't get this done, I am never going to go to bed tonight. And she went and she asked my husband to help her. And I woke up this morning and I thought, I should have helped her with that paper, you know? And so again, just even as the last 12 hours, I've had this same thought. And I remember one time somebody said to me that when you think about work-life balance, right? We want our life to be like this, but your life will never be like this. It'll be like this, and it'll be like this. And the importance is to try and balance the amount of time it's like this in comparison to the amount of time it's like this. And that was a game changer for me to really think about. There are moments where my work life is going to take precedence, but there are a lot of other moments where my family life will take precedence. And I just need to work on trying to keep those at equal levels. And I think about that every day.
And, you know, probably, Carrie, you were working on something very important for Murray State that you did on a timely basis. Sadie might have had that paper due over the weekend, you know, who knows, and just brought it to you. It will be fine that someone else helped her, or that she had to do it by herself.
Right.
You know, my daughter now is 34. She's an adult. She has her own daughter. So, but I will never forget, she is a professional now in Paducah. So, you know, every year our chamber takes a trip to DC. I might get emotional telling the story. But every year, you know, we go to DC. And so I've been going for years. I went with the paper mill. I would go lobbying then a couple of times a year, but I always went with the chamber. I think we've been on 20 something, and I've been on every one of them. But one year when she was younger, I was a dancer, and I noticed somehow I had a cell phone, so I can't remember exactly the time frame, but my cell phone kept going off, and it was her. And I was in a meeting, and I thought, I can't leave this meeting. So I finally, you know, was able to call her back, and I was like, Whitney, what is wrong? And she was like, I can't find my ballet slippers. You know, so I'm like, they're in your dance bag. No, they're not. And I said, look in the zipper in the front. I feel sure they're there. Oh, there they are, Mom. Bye. So then, you know, I go back into trying to be in a meeting with our United States Senator or whatever, you know, acting like I know what I'm talking about and doing that. And so fast forward 2 years ago, I think it is, we're in DC, and she's there as a professional in Paducah. And I was leading a meeting with the Department of Energy. And when we walked out, she came over and she said, I think maybe I should apologize to you. And I said, what about? And she said, I don't think I ever really realized what you were doing when you were doing some of your travels and some of your DC trip. I knew what it was important, but I just didn't realize it. And today, seeing you made me proud of you. Yeah. So there you go. Win for the mom.
Win. That's right.
It's a balancing act, but you can do it, and always ask for help. Had I not had help, I couldn't have made sure she was getting to where I wanted her to be able to be after school.
Right.
But I think as women also, we don't want to ask for help because it makes you feel weak. To me, it does. So I try to do it all. Except I knew I couldn't with her, and I didn't want her not to get to do things because, you know, when I worked at the paper mill, I lived some in Paducah, so I had about a 35-minute commute. So it was not possible I could pick her up at school. Right. And back then, years ago, you didn't just leave work to go to your child's party at school, a Valentine's party. If I was going to go to her party, I had to take a day vacation. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a big fan of Halloween. And so I would never take that day off to go to her Halloween party. I just missed those. And then later, when she was analyzing, you know, writing that summary of things she remembered during preschool, the things she liked and the things she didn't like and all that, I really hated that my mom missed the Halloween party. That's like my neck to I took vacation day to get to the others.
But now she knows.
Now she
knows. That's right.
But it's easier now. I think it's just more accepted in the workforce. And the things that we, you know, I feel like, and I hope those of us that are now older in the workforce have paved the way where it's okay if you have to miss work. If you leave work for an hour to run to your child's party, you're going to be a better employee because you're happy and you're not sitting there for an hour miserable because you're having to miss something. And hopefully, you're going to get your work done.
Right.
That's the thing. I always made sure I got my work done. And you just do what you have to do to get it all done.
That's right. You mentioned something earlier that I wanted to point out too, because I just thought it was such good advice. You said that you kept showing up in the community even after you didn't get those positions the first time. You kept meeting the right people, putting yourself out there, showing your willingness to work with people and partner with people, and that ties in really nicely to showing up, not just in the jobs that you have, but just in the community and with the people that you need to meet. So can you talk a little bit about why that networking and meeting people is so important and why students should consider that even now as students?
As students, I want a couple of things I want to encourage them to be involved with is really get to know your professors. Get to know them. It's important. Get to know people on campus. Get involved in organizations on campus. I was involved while I was there. I think I mentioned I lived at home my freshman year, which was a little bit harder. And then I just put my foot down and said, I'm moving on campus my sophomore year. And I think, I told you, my mom said, no, you're not. My dad said, yes, she is. So I think my freshman year was challenging. And then I did move in. I got involved in a lot of different organizations. I met Bob McGahee, who I credit with life-changing decisions. He was an amazing person and confidant and professor and encourager. And I got really involved in my major, which was at that time, mass communications, broadcast communications, old radio, TV. And I did TV shows and I did radio shows and sold advertising for WKMS and just did all those types of things that would get me to meet more people and to be very involved on campus. And then that helped me to be able to get an internship. And I know a lot of majors require internships. Here at our chamber, we encourage companies to have internships because students need them and they help you so much with your growth. Knowing you just get, even if it's an internship in a major that you change eventually. Mine was at a radio station. It was at WHOP radio. I never ended up working in radio, but I feel like I know radio so much better just because I worked there. I did the TV and then, it's also such a resume builder for both being involved, showing up, knowing, meeting the right people, getting a job, knowing the right people in that community. When I moved to Hopkinsville just for a summer to do the radio station, part of my rounds were included going to City Hall and going to the police department, going to the fire department to get all the news, to meet those people. We, as a major, we went to Nashville. I talked about that, and we did a field trip to some different music businesses. And one of the guys there gave out his business card. I put it in my pocket and kept it. And then later, when I was looking for a job, I called him and told him that I was a student on that field trip and that he had interviewed us or he had met with us, and I was in Nashville looking for a job, and he interviewed me and I got the job. So all of those are important. And when you do launch your career, John Williams Sr., who is the founder of CSI, he speaks every year to our Leadership Paducah program here at the Chamber. And one of the comments he makes is the best way to learn about leadership is through volunteering with a community organization, a nonprofit. And you're going to experience the highs and lows and the challenges, but you're going to learn so much about your community, so much about yourself, about leadership, and you're going to learn to meet a whole network of people. You never know when someone that you meet today might be on the interview panel for a job that you're interviewing for in 5 years. And because they remembered you from that, you're going to have your foot in the door. You're already going to, if they have a good impression of you, you're already going to be a few steps ahead of everyone else. So show up, get to know who the people are. There's nothing wrong with that. I pay attention better if I sit at the front of the room. So, I mean, I'm going to usually try to do that if it's something that I want to. Now, you're going to walk in and see me in the back of the room some point. But usually I'm there. And I've met some of my, really dear friends because of just being involved in the community.
Well, to kind of tie together our last 2 points, I think a lot of times as women, and especially as moms, it can be difficult or just less natural to get out there and network and meet people, because I know for me anyway, my network of people is sort of like the moms of the kids that my kids are friends with. It's like that circle. You just find yourself sort of not trapped in that circle, but just in that circle all the time. So it can be difficult, I think, as a mom and probably as a woman in general, to get out of that circle and meet other people, meet the right people, like what you were saying. So do you think that women do have to be more intentional about networking? Do you feel like that's something that we have to be more thoughtful about and more intentional about in general?
I know that it's more, women have to be more intentional. I think we all have to be very intentional about it. Mm-hmm. You always have different groups of friends. Mm-hmm. My husband and I have, honestly, our couples friends. I had the friends, my daughter danced competitively. So I had those moms that we traveled with, that we got to be very close friends with. Let's face it, if you travel together for 10 years, that you have to get along, where and when it's okay to stop and eat, when it's not. And so I had those group of friends. And then I had my work friends. And those were people that were men and women. And so it's a balancing, but you draw so much from each one and you can enjoy so much. And I think you need all of that. You need that balance of having friends from all walks of your life. Church, you're going to have probably even different friends there. So it's just very important that you build those relationships. And sometimes I think we're not doing that as much as we used to, and building those relationships. And it's really important. I'll just say that it's really important that you have someone that you can reach out to when you need help. And I feel like I have those relationships in Paducah, both men and women, that I could call and say, hey, this is, can you give me some advice on how to handle this? Or maybe even I don't feel like I'm being treated fairly on this issue. Can you give me some perspective on why, or can you provide your support? I mean, sometimes you just have to ask, I need your support on this issue, and ask for it.
Do you feel like, you said, right now we're all sort of struggling to, get out there and connect with people and reconnect with people and that kind of thing. Do you feel like, with our young people, our students, what can we do, or how can we encourage them, do you think, to recognize and understand the importance of that? Because I think, if you don't see people doing that during those very formative and important years in your life where you're, about to step out into the world yourself independently, it can be almost, it's just something that you don't recognize as important. So what is your message, and how do you think we encourage young people to understand that making those connections, shaking someone's hand, meeting someone in person, getting to know them, how can we encourage them to recognize the importance of that?
I think giving them experiences where we're pushing them. I'm always saying, just be bold and get out there. At our last chamber breakfast, we talked about a community that involves their youth is a stronger community because they're building the leaders for the future. And I've been on a lot of calls lately about leadership, and we have a youth lead program here, and we've never really mixed them with our leadership Paducah program. I'm being specific to our community. But next week we're having a luncheon to bring together those youth lead students. They're high school juniors, our leadership Paducah, which are participants which range in age from 20 to 50s, and our chamber board. And so we're having a group luncheon, And I hope that that will be an inspiration to them. I'm honestly, I'm having to reach out specifically to those high school students and say, want to encourage you to attend. We will have some mingling time where you'll meet someone from Leadership Paducah. So we have to continue to inspire them and encourage them and ask them. And really, people know me, I'm not afraid to be pushy. So I'm going to push them to be here. And, I just talked to one of our school systems about bringing students. We have one school system that brings students to our chamber breakfast. I've asked the other schools to consider that. Bring some of your ambassadors to the chamber breakfast because they can see what it's like to be in the real world. And for us, then as they get in the real world, first of all, we want them to come back to our community. We all need to fill our jobs in our local communities. And one of the best ways to do that is to grow your own leaders. And that's the same in every community. You want them to come back. That's where they have a support group. So we want them to see what it's like to be involved in the community and to hear about nonprofits and to hear about job opportunities and the way to be involved in your community. So I think you just have to continually push and encourage.
Well, that's definitely something that I can see you do. You're so passionate about it when you speak about it, and when you speak about Murray State, and when you speak about young people. That's just so inspiring to me. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for just sharing that passion with us. Carrie, did you have sort of any remarks or closing remarks that you wanted to talk about specific to Murray State?
Well, I would just like to kind of take what Sandra said. And, when we talk about showing up, we talk about advising others to show up. And I think what Sandra does in her professional and personal life is she shows up for others. And so leading by example, giving them the opportunities to do that. I was just sitting here thinking as Sandra was talking, have I done that for my own kids? I want to do it for all the kids at Murray State. Have I done it for my own kids?
Right.
Showing up for them and providing them the opportunities so that when the time comes, they're set up for success. I think there are a lot of ways that we can do that in our careers and ask our colleagues to do the same. We want them to show up, but we're going to show up for them too when they do. And showing up for each other as women, I think, is so vital and so important, and having each other's backs and, that shared experience. Like you said earlier, Abigail, or I guess it was Sandra maybe, that said she read in a book, I thought it was just me until I read it in a book. Well, when you have those shared experiences, you can learn from others that it's not just me. There are other people out there that are going through the same thing. And how did you get through it? And here's how I got through it. And, showing up for each other. So I'm just so appreciative of Sandra and of all of the alumni, and especially the alumni women, the alumnae who have showed up for us and continue to do so. And I wanted to thank you for that, Sandra. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I think it's just important that we pay it forward. And I appreciate the opportunity that I've had that Murray State gave to me. And I appreciate the opportunity of sharing experiences. And I hope that I have inspired some women. Let's face it, it can be very intimidating to walk into rooms, even for me today. And I should be out, it should be out hat for me. But there are different occasions that I walk into, and it could be intimidating because it's so many people, or I don't know anyone. So think about that if you're 15 or 16 and you're walking into a room of adults. So we just have to, I say do a lot of back patting and assure them that this is going to be fun, take them and introduce them to people and inspire them to be leaders in our community. And the world is run, let's face it, the world is run by those who show up. And that's who we inspire you to be, is someone who shows up to make important decisions on behalf of yourself, your family, your community, and our country. And we're very fortunate to live where we are today and to have the freedoms that we do, and to have the ability to have an education. As it's just, we're very fortunate. So I guess we're very blessed. And of course, I would have to end with saying, go Racers. No, they're my favorite. I love several schools. As we talk about at home, you can love several different schools, but Racers are in my heart, and I'm pulling for them.
They certainly are. That is evident for sure. And I just appreciate you both so much and appreciate you showing up today for the Women's Center and for our students. And so just wish both of you a happy Women's History Month, and to both of you as well. Go Racers.
Go Racers. Thanks, Abigail.